Welcome back to SportsLine, everybody. We're pleased to be joined via Zoom. He is a Titans beat writer since 1997, publisher of TitansInsider.com, co-host of the George Plaster Show on WNSR Sports Radio, of which I do a show on that station as well with Greg Pogue every Monday through Friday from 9 to 11. You can also catch him in and around local TV, but he's joining us here on NewsChannel 5+. The great Terry McCormick joining us. Terry, good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, John.
Absolutely, man. We haven't done this in a while. Let's get right to it. Titans back at training camp today. Of course, yesterday he gave a lot of the vets, 21 in fact, pretty much the day off, allowed the kind of middle of the roster to the bottom of the roster guys to get extended practice time in pads, doing some hitting. In a situation like this year, Terry, with no preseason games, this is probably the best way for Vrabel and other NFL coaches to get a look at those guys, no?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, with 21 guys sitting out, it was almost like a first preseason game where you just hold guys out, you play the guys that you don't know a lot about and the guys you haven't seen, and you see who makes an impression on you. So good work for those younger guys and those guys fighting for roster spots.
Yeah, and back to a more traditional workout today. I was not there today. I'm sure you were. From what I understand, Tannehill looked really good, threw a nice bomb to A.J. Brown in a one-on-one drill to kind of start things off. How has he looked to you in training camp? You know, you hear about how well he's looked at camp so far. I've been to a couple of practices. He's looked pretty good. And just the fact that he feels pretty comfortable now being the leader of this football team, doesn't he?
Absolutely he does. And I think one of the things, if you're a Titans fan, one of the things to be encouraged about from watching these training camp practices. Last year, it was very evident that he and A.J. Brown were on the same wavelength, that he had a better rapport probably with A.J. than any other receiver on this team. I think you'd probably agree with that, right?
I definitely would. And, not only him, Terry, I mean, you look at the sync that he had with Jonnu Smith, the plays that he made with Adam Humphries, a guy that I've been preaching forever that they need to target him more, even though A.J. Brown is a budding superstar. But, yeah, it seems like he's got good chemistry and good sync with all the receivers, something Marcus Mariota unfortunately just didn't have. What about A.J. Brown? Is this guy, in your opinion, is he already a top 10 receiver, and can he be by season's end?
I think he can be. I think he can be. I'd say right now he's probably in the top 15 in the league, probably in the top half. And kind of where I was going on that Tannehill front, last year the rapport was with A.J. Brown. There was no doubt that they were on the same wavelength. But this year in camp, I think he's making a concerted effort to not only stay on the same wavelength with A.J. Brown, but he's also connected well with Jonnu Smith on a number of plays, Adam Humphries, as you mentioned, and he's involved in Corey Davis, of all things. Ever since Corey came off the PUP list, it's been 2 or 3 nice plays a day, usually those deep crosses over the middle that he's been able to hit Corey.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Corey Davis. By the way, Terry McCormick from TitansInsider.com is our guest here on NewsChannel 5+ on SportsLine. I'm glad you mentioned Corey Davis because obviously a big year for him, right? I mean, this guy was the 5th overall pick in the 2017 draft. He's been good, but he's not been 5th overall pick in the draft good. The Titans declined to pick up his 5th-year option, so he could become a free agent next year. An important year for him to put some good stuff on tape, either to have the Titans reconsider and sign him long-term or for him to sign on with another team. Either way, you're going to get a motivated Corey Davis, I think, this year. What say you?
I think you're right. I think you're going to get a motivated Corey Davis. I also think that barring the franchise tag being applied to him at year's end, you're probably going to get a Corey Davis that's going to get a new address next year because he's either going to play well enough that he's going to price himself out of the Titans' range like Jack Conklin did when the Titans declined his option last year, or he's going to be a so-so guy. People are going to look at him as a bust for being the fifth pick in the draft and not living up to expectations, and he's going to go on and sign a middling contract with somebody else. So big year for Corey Davis in both respects in terms of what he needs to do production-wise and probably what his future is going to be. To me, I think when you look at Corey Davis being the 5th overall pick, it puts an unfair label and expectation on him. Mm-hmm. If the Titans had drafted Corey Davis at the end of the second round, top of the third round, would anybody be complaining about how productive he's been? Probably not.
Right.
But because he was the 5th overall pick in the draft, the expectations are higher. You see the same thing with a lot of quarterback prospects that go bust because they were overdrafted in the top 10 or 15 of the draft, and then they become journeyman backups. Blaine Gabbert.
Yeah, no question about it. Terry, where are you at with Vic Beasley? This guy just doesn't pass the smell test for me, okay? He doesn't show up on time for camp. From what we understand, it was an unexcused absence. Those are the words of Jon Robinson, the GM. From what we understand, he didn't really contact anybody to say why he was going to be late. He shows up late, and then he ends up on the NFI list, and he hasn't practiced yet. Do you think, in your opinion, are Mike Vrabel, Jon Robinson, and more importantly, Amy Adams Strunk starting to have maybe a little bit of buyer's remorse when it comes to Vic Beasley? Because from what I understand, this guy's a good kid and he can be a productive player, but man, it's not starting well for him as a Titan, is it?
No, he's definitely gotten off on the wrong foot, JB. I think Vic Beasley, I want to give the guy the benefit of the doubt because I've never met him. He's a new guy coming in here. You want to at least kind of see what he's all about. But because of the unexcused absence, 10 days not showing up, then landing on the NFI list, and now we're talking, this team's been at it for a month now, and we still have seen Vic Beasley twice. Once working out a little bit early in camp on a side field, and once riding an exercise bike. Other than that, he's been persona non grata.
Yeah, it's been kind of a mystery. Hopefully he'll get on the field soon. Terry, overall, what do you think? How do you think Vrabel's handled this unusual preseason? As we said, no preseason games this year. Kind of a condensed OTAs. The testing period, then the acclimation period, and watching Hard Knocks on HBO, you see what these teams are up against. How do you assess the job that Vrabel's done, kind of holding this whole thing together so far?
Well, I think we won't really know until you see game action week 1 out at Denver. But from just the naked eye and watching practice and all, the thing that I like most about Mike Vrabel as a head coach is he's a deal with it kind of guy. No matter what comes down the pike, he figures out a way to deal with it. People ask him about rule changes. People ask him about protocols. He says, hey, whatever the league says do, that's what we're going to do. So, whenever there's talk about a guy like Vic Beasley or talk about bringing in Jadeveon Clowney, he's philosophical about it. He just says, hey, we're going to practice with the guys that are here. We're going to get them ready to play, and we're going to do the best we can. I think that's one of his best attributes. He's not always the best game manager in terms of making crucial decisions. I think we saw a couple of questionable 4th down rolls of the dice last year that were unnecessary. But I think everybody in that locker room buys into Mike Vrabel because he's a leader of men, and he's a guy that doesn't let obstacles and roadblocks get in the way of what his mission is.
Yeah, no question, Terry. And, of course, big player move last week. The Titans, they say goodbye to their 7th-round draft pick, Cole McDonald, who we all know was a project to begin with. And one of the things we've been talking about all off season long was providing a quality backup, or at least a veteran experienced backup behind Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. You and I both know the odds of your quarterback in this league starting and finishing all 16 games are pretty remote. You need somebody that can at least hold down the fort for you. And, you keep hearing about how good they felt about Logan Woodside. Bringing in a guy like Trevor Siemian, a guy that's been a starter before, I feel a lot better about the Titans QB room now than I did a couple of weeks ago. What say you?
I don't disagree at all, JB. I think when you look at the situation that they were presented with, this is a team that fancies itself as a playoff and Super Bowl contender. They're hoping that Ryan Tannehill duplicates what he did last year in 13 games total, counting regular season and playoffs. They're hoping that he can take them on another deep postseason run. That said, exactly what you brought up. A lot of times quarterbacks get nicked up. They miss a game or two here. They miss 2 or 3 games in a season. That sort of thing. We saw it all the time with Marcus Mariota. I don't think, if you can consider yourself a strong contender, I don't think you are doing yourself any favors if you go into the season with a number 2 quarterback that's never taken a snap in a regular season game in the NFL. Trevor Siemian has done that. Logan Woodside has not. They knew that Cole McDonald was such a project that he was not going to be able to contribute anything this year, even with the expanded practice squads. He was basically a long-term project. This was going to be a red shirt year for him. They couldn't afford that. If this team went 5-11 last year and they were rebuilding, absolutely you hang on to Cole McDonald, and maybe you even go with Logan Woodside as the obvious number 2. But when you've got a team that you think can go deep in the playoffs, can't afford to roll the dice and take chances like that.
Yeah, and I just found it interesting that our good friend Mr. Koharski kind of gave the Titans organization a hard time over this, saying, you know, Cole McDonald was a wasted draft pick. But I always see seventh-round draft picks as glorified undrafted free agents anyway. They're usually long shots to make the team. We've obviously seen some diamonds in the rough and some exceptions to the rule, but I agree with you. This was a smart decision to make in terms of getting quality experience behind Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, with all due respect to Paul, you know,
listen, we love Paul. I like to pick on him too, but we love Paul. We love Paul.
Yeah. He's certainly a guy that, you know, is plugged in certain areas and, you know, has his opinions and things like that. But to me, you know, kind of like what you said with it being a glorified undrafted free agent, being a 7th-round pick, this is the second time in Jon Robinson's 5 years that he's gambled a late-round pick on a quarterback. You know, he did it with Luke Falk a couple of years ago. Didn't work out. It was obvious when Luke Falk got here that he wasn't ready to play at the NFL level, didn't have a strong enough arm. Cole McDonald was a guy that was going to need work with his throwing mechanics to get him to throw more over the top, to get rid of that baseball-type delivery that he had. So, to me, what Jon Robinson is doing is he's taking a late flyer on a quarterback, and he may continue to do this every couple of years because, remember, he came from the New England Patriots, and they found the ultimate diamond in the rough with Tom Brady back in 1999. So,
and he's still playing.
It doesn't hurt in my mind. It doesn't hurt him. It makes it smart in my mind when you're talking about 6th or 7th round picks. Play the lottery. See if you can hit on somebody that might become a halfway decent quarterback. That's what Jacksonville's done with Gardner Minshew. They found a starter, at least in the short run. So why not? I mean, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's not the first 7th round pick to get cut from a roster.
Yeah, no question about it. Terry, I've been very impressed with Derrick Henry. You know, when he first came in the league, I wasn't crazy about him. Really wasn't crazy about him coming out of Alabama, even though he won the Heisman Trophy and a couple of national championships. I felt like that second year when he skipped minicamp that he was kind of pouting a little bit because he felt like he should have been the starter over DeMarco Murray. And it didn't seem to me like he really took to DeMarco Murray, kind of showing him the ropes. But man, the last couple of seasons, especially last year, wins the NFL rushing title, leads the NFL in carries, really becomes one of the leaders of this football team, signs a big contract in the offseason, and at the practices I've been to, he's really taken a leadership role with the running backs and drills, and it seems like every free second he gets, he's working on his pass catching. The knock on him has always been he's not a 3-down back, but he's working on his hands. He's working on his pass catching. He's not just resting on the fact that he signed this big contract. He's trying to get better as a complete running back and a complete football player. I've been impressed with him so far. What have you seen?
I agree. I think the maturation process that Derrick Henry has gone through during the time that he's been here is remarkable, because I agree with you. When he first got here, he didn't seem like that he was a complete buy-in guy. I'm not saying that he was a malcontent or anything like that, but I think, he was a guy that was still learning, feeling his way around, and he didn't always run north and south. He kind of, tried to hit the home run every time up, tried to make, dance, make somebody miss, didn't want to just stick it in the hole, like you want to see a big back do up in the line.
Right.
Last 2 years, ever since his talk with Eddie George, he has been doing absolutely all of that. And that's exactly what you need him to do. The thing that I go back to, you wonder how motivational it was for Derrick Henry when on the day that David Fluellen got carries ahead of him. I forget who it was against, but David Fluellen got carries ahead of him, then got injured. Henry got his shot, and then from that point on, he's been a different back.
Yeah, I agree with you. In the NFL, you know this. You've seen a ton of games. You got to get the dirty yards. I've always said if all you can get me is 2 yards, get me 2 yards, because 2nd and 8 is better than 2nd and 12, right? I mean, that's just, and, you know, you're right. Ever since he's had that heart-to-heart talk with Eddie George, boy, he's been a different football player. Hey, Terry, I'm up against a break. Can you hang for another segment?
Sure.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Terry McCormick from TitansInsider.com will rejoin us on the other side. We're going to talk about some of the defensive players, and I want to get Terry's thoughts as to whether or not he thinks one Jadeveon Clowney will eventually sign with the two-tone blue. All that is ahead on SportsLine. Stay with us. We're back after this.